Okay, Chapter 16, this is how to use the list view and data pager controls. So, the list view and data pager are some additional controls. We looked at the details view and form view, and then before that we looked at the grid view. So it's just another couple more controls. I'll throw out some of the you're going to see a lot of the same things with the templates and like we've seen with the previous controls, but there are a few differences with these two controls. In that because they're meant for displaying and formatting the data differently, they have a few different options. So we'll go over that. We'll go over specifically grouping the data. So there's a way to group your data in a sort of grid layout, but you'll see in a second. And it still has the capability to edit, delete, insert rows, paging. So we'll look at the different layouts. We'll look at the data pager and how that helps set up paging. And again, the before and after action events are available as well. Alright, what's a list view control look like? This is an example of one. This is in the insert mode, so it allows you to enter a row of data. It's got the little insert down here button when you go into insert mode. Some other attributes of the list view control, of course, it's got to be connected to a data source. So there's a data source ID, there's some data key names, there's an insert item position, some other elements, the different templates that are all available. There's a configure in the Smart menu that lets you configure the list view control, and this is something that's different than from the previous controls in that what you can do is you can select a layout. So in this example, this is the classic grid layout that we've seen before with like grid view, but there's also a tiled, which is kind of interesting, and then bulleted list, flow, and single row. Let me actually show you some of those. So let me jump out to Visual Studio and let's go ahead and open up the starter code for this chapter. So we'll go open up Exercise 16 starter code. And this is Exercise 16-1. They have you adding a list view control to this page. So let's go ahead and see what we have to start with. So we just have the Halloween Superstore, nothing being displayed yet. And they have us come down here and go and grab a list view control and drag that on there and hook that up to a data source. And what are we displaying? I believe it's products. Let me just double check that in our book. Actually, we're looking for customers, excuse me, so let's go pull up customers. Not that it really would have mattered, but I'll stick to the book. And we're showing what? Last name, first name, city, state, and phone number. So let's grab those guys. Make sure our data looks right. Finish that guy. Now, we've hooked up our data source. The next thing we want to do, well, it even warns you, hey, you might want to refresh your schema, and then if we do that, it'll actually give us an idea of where the data that we've hooked up is going to be displayed. The other thing we can do, I haven't configured yet, so let me configure it. Let's configure our list, is to select the layout. So once we select our layout, then we'll see sort of the preview of the data. And these are the different layouts. So there's grid view that we've kind of seen before. Then there's tile view, which is very interesting because it makes use of this grouping technique. So it gives us columns, and the default is 3 columns. And then the other ones are kind of neat too. There's a bulleted list. And it keeps warning me that it's going to regenerate my view, but that's what I want, right? So I think in the exercise 16.1, what do they want us to choose? The grid layout. So let's do that. Then the next thing they want us to do is to add, well, they want us to run it and see how it looks like, so we'll do that. But then what we're going to do next is add sorting capabilities. And actually, maybe I'll jump back to the slides and talk about it before I do that. So there's the list view in a nutshell. We just hooked it up. I honestly, though, I think and we're going to talk about how to do this in a second, or some of the what's being generated for us in a second. But if we change this to the tile view, this is probably what I use more than not whenever I use the list view control. So let's see what that looks like. When you go to tile view, that gives us that kind of, it's like a report almost, these columns of data coming back. Can't do that with the grid view control. So using this list view control allows me to do that kind of stuff. Let's talk about some of the details. So you have this layout template that the list view uses. This is new in versus some of the other controls we looked at. And what the layout does is it says, hey, I've got this table here, and in the table I'm going to create what's called a placeholder. And that placeholder, it's in this row here, is going to be replaced by the row of data or rows of data, depending if I'm in a grid view, would be a single row, or tiled view. In this case, it's a group of rows, and the default group is 3. So if I go back to Visual Studio for a second and run it, that layout is saying, hey, show me 3 rows of data. If I wanted, say, 5 rows of data, I could come into my code, so go into the source, and find the group parameter, the group item count, and say, hey, you know what? Actually, I want to see 5. So now let's run that. And now I see 5 rows of data in that group, and that's all because in the layout, so let's go into our actual code and find the layout template. It's saying, hey, whatever's in here, get replaced by those, in this case, 5 rows of data. So the funny thing is, if I try to put something here, if I try to say, hey, let's put some data here. Dave was here. That's not going to display anywhere. Why not? Because that's being replaced. That item placeholder is actually getting replaced with that 5 rows of data. So you're not going to see that whatever I just typed there. It's just a placeholder. If that makes sense. So this placeholder is, gets replaced by X amount of rows of data, and the layout template is really for just laying out the framework around those rows of data. Now I could put something up here at the top. I could put, this is my report, something along those lines. And that'll show up because that part's not being replaced. The layout's just defining the layout, and then the placeholders are what's actually getting replaced. So there, this is my report, shows up at the top of the, before the table gets generated. All right. So we still have our general item templates for defining how each item is going to come back. In a grid view, we would get a row for each item. Now, if we want to do sorting is a little tricky or a little different with the list view control. There's no, if I go back to Visual Studio, there's no sort of right-clicking and saying I want to do sort. I want to configure. There's no add sorting here. There's paging. I can enable paging, and you get that data pager that we're going to talk about in a second. And there's different options for that, but there's no sorting per se. So how do you do sorting? Well, what you do is you have to use this link button. So let me open up my standard. And so not this button up here. That's the regular ASP button for like button clicks and whatnot. But the link button, which is right here. This guy, if I drag him on there, and I don't want anyone to just drag him on here because who knows where he would show up in the code. So I'm actually going to go to my source and put him in the layout. If I can find my layout template again, where there it is. So typically I'd put him in here somewhere, and that way he'll show up at the top for each. Like if I want to add be able to click on last name for sorting. Right now, when I run this guy, last name shows up at the top, but I can't sort on it. So let me go back And now I'll add a link button there. So I'll drag that link button in there. And I'll replace the default text of link button and put in last name sortable, so we don't need this anymore. It'll show up twice. Now this is the link button, but I still need to give it a couple more pieces of information. I need to say, hey, this is a command button, or this has, this clicking this button executes a certain command. So I'll come in here, I'll get the IntelliSense up. So what do we want? We want command name, and that's going to be equal to sort. So it's going to do a sorting function, and then, well, what's it going to sort on? It needs a command argument, and again, let me get my little IntelliSense to pop up. So I hit Control J to get IntelliSense to pop up, and tell it to say, oh, the argument is going to be one of the column names, right? So in this case, last name would make sense. It's not case sensitive, so it's not going to holler that I put a capital sort, capital. I could do whatever. Let's go ahead and run this guy. Now I've got this sortable column, and when I click on it, it sorts. So that's how to implement sorting using the list view control. You have to actually add a link button and give it a command name and a command argument. If I want it multiple, I could put a comma there and do first name, and now it will sort first name, last name. And let's actually, I don't like the way that looks. Let's get rid of that little sortable. That's too much. There we go. Take a look at that. Oop. Build errors. So it looks like I cut too much when I went here. What am I missing? Run. Oh, this is supposed to be a closing attribute, right? I've got to open ASP button, ASP link button there. I need to close my link button there. So be careful when you fat finger stuff like I just did. You got to put it back the way it was. So now this should do last name and first name, and we would know if we had two people with the same last name. See if we can find one. I don't know if we do. Probably Smith. Oh, Brown. There we go. So yeah, it's doing last name and first name. All right. You can have paging. We talked about how to right-click and add next previous pagers. And when you click on that, it sets up a data pager. It adds a data pager control to your list view control. It adds the fields element, so it knows what the next previous pager button type is. The show first button, the last first button. You can change it to numeric, and then it'll set it up with the fields for numeric pager control. These are some of the attributes of the data pager control. Page size, do I want 10 records? Do I want 20 records? Some other attributes, you can, what's the button type, whether or not I want to show the first, the previous, next, or last buttons, the button count, the button type. And again, these all get generated for you when you first click on it and you say you want paging, and then you can go in and make changes to customize it how you want it. So this is an example of the list view control with 2 columns. Again, going in and changing the item count. It makes use. Oh, so what I didn't point out is just has the template or the when you change from a grid view to a list to a tiled view, what it does is it generates this group template. So before I talked about the layout template and now how it had a placeholder, when you switch to tiled, it adds another template called group template, and that has a placeholder. So now we're doing double replacements because the group template replaces this, and then the item template replaces this. So let's see that in action. So what are we looking like right now? We're in grid view, but let's change that to tiled view. And then we'll go to our source, and then let's change it. What do we have, 3 by default? Let's change it to 4 or 2 or something. I guess the slide had 2, so we'll change it to 2. But this isn't the important part. The important part is that it added the group template. So before we had the layout template, but now the layout template references a group placeholder. So again, anything in here is not going to be, showing up. And down in my item template, or my group template, where's that guy at? Same thing. So this is just a placeholder here, and I could put a bunch of stuff here. But you're not going to see that because that's going to get replaced with the rows, in this case the 2 rows of data coming back from my item template. So when I run that guy, I get 2 rows of data because I specified 2 rows, and this is all, it's the item template is what's actually dictating what gets displayed here. So if I actually wanted to put, maybe a label to label each customer, put some space between those or something along those lines, I would come to my item template. So let's go find my item template, and I would say something along the lines of, this is my alternate item template, so maybe if I wanted to change, every other item I wanted to say something, I could come in here and say something along the lines of, I don't know, maybe I just want to put an asterisk or something. Oops, I think I put an extra TD in there. But there, so now I've got every other item, which in a two column is just, with the one column is getting an asterisk in front of each one. Or if I wanted to do something like what, I think the neat thing about HTML is sometimes if you make these flubs right here, it actually ignores it, right? That's, the Internet Explorer is not going to holler about an extra closing tag. But if I go to my item template, yeah, it looks better. Had an extra closing tag in there. There's my item template. So now, if I wanted to put something in here to just say, what, like, just to label it, then that's where I would do it. So the item template is still what's showing up for each item. That's how it gets changes in my report using the list view control. All right. So at the end of chapter 16, they talk about creating this product list application using the list view control, exercise 16.1, and this is what they walk you through setting up, and this is the example code that you end up with. Some final notes on the different buttons that you bring in. I mentioned the sort, the command button that equals the sort. Just like with the other previous controls we talked about, you can also add an edit button and a delete button. But again, with this one, you actually have to add them in here like this. But again, once you have those, you would get the capability to do inserts and edits and deletes, just like with our other controls. All right. Well, again, any questions, shoot me an email, or if we're in the live meeting, feel free to use the Q&A panel. Thank you.